Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT ranked meta video. Our analysts are here to go through the 11.9 meta for each stage of the game. The Set 5 meta is rapidly changing every day as players discover new ways to play the game. Unlike Set 4, the flow of the game is a lot less formulaic, which makes it much harder to play consistently. There's a lot to cover today, so let's go ahead and dive on in. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come. Be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. Alright, let's get back to the video. To begin with, we'll be covering the different parts of the early game. Before we get into any specific stages, let's start with the beginning carousel. In Set 5, the component you get from the beginning carousel, while important, doesn't have the same value as it had in previous sets. The reason for this is the shadow item system and the introduction of the armory mechanic. These two factors make it a lot easier to flex what items you have later on, so the starting component doesn't pigeonhole you in one direction or another. As for which component to prioritize, it really depends on what type of player you are. Do you want to force a specific composition? In that case, look for items pertaining to those builds like Bow for Vayne or Tyr for champions like Lissandra or Karma. If you're open to playing flexible, then looking for components that you can turn into universally good items is the way to go. This means Rod, Sword, or even Belt. Rod and Belt can both be used for Morellonomicon, which is a top tier item in Set 5 as there's a lot of healing. The best rule to follow with what component to prioritize is which component you're comfortable playing with if you have a double of it. Going back to Tyr as an example, it's easy to play around a second Tyr because you can use it for a blue buff. But 2 cloaks can be much more restricting, so if you're not comfortable playing around having potentially 2 cloaks early game, then aim for a different component. There's a lot of items in Set 5, but luckily with a plethora of options available, you're no longer at a major disadvantage by not having the perfect starting component. Let's move on from the beginning carousel into Stage 1. Stage 1 has a lot of variables to consider in Set 5. First off is how much gold you get and when you get it. Players that hit gold from their early PvE loot will naturally have more options as they can buy out their shops, whereas players that get gold on 1-4 have far fewer options. And of course, there's the variable of whether you get gold or champions. On top of that, there's variance in what drops you get, whether that's 2 items and 6 gold, or 2 items, 2 gold and a Nico's help, or even all gold and no additional items. With so much variance, it's important to keep in mind the best rule of the early game, which is to buy pairs. Buying pairs of champions leads to hitting 2-star units, which generally equates to playing your strongest board. Of course, there's more to it than that, but buying pairs is a good place to start. For specific champions and traits to look for, well, there's a lot of options. Lissandra with Renewer can do well, Vayne with Forgotten, Ziggs with Hellion, and Kha'Zix with Dawnbringer are just a few of the stronger early game boards. Basically, whichever champion you're able to pair up and 2-star, just try to pair them with their traits as best you can. One last thing about Stage 1 before we move on is not to use your early components unless you know for sure what item you want to make. This also applies to Stage 2 and really Stage 3 and 4 as well, since you want to wait for the armory since it may give you an item that you're looking for. With that, let's move into Stage 2. This is where you'll make the decision to aim for a win streak or try to lose streak for better priority on the 2-4 carousel. In general, we advise against playing to intentionally lose early rounds because maintaining high health is essential to placing well in the late game. But in Set 5, with shadow items only appearing on the armory and carousel, it's a legitimate strategy to intentionally lose health for priority. The decision to do so is based on how strong your board is at 2-1. Do you have a cohesive board with at least 1 2-star unit and an item that you can make? Then consider leveling if you have the economy to do so. Of course, it's important to note that you don't have to level to win, so only level on 2-1 if it gives your board a meaningful boost in power. It's a good habit to get into scouting at the end of 1-4 and early 2-1 to compare your board to other players to give you an idea as to whether or not you should be leveling. Keep in mind you can also level on 2-2, but the point of doing it early is to try and force a win streak. On the other hand, if your board is much weaker than others, don't level. On 2-2, you can once again evaluate whether leveling is advantageous for your board or not. Keep in mind the goal for Stage 2 is to try and maintain either a win streak or a loss streak, so if you've already lost on 2-1, consider not leveling to aim for a 5-loss streak by Krugs. Your health will take a hit, but you can always stabilize during Stage 3. Not leveling is also available for any players looking to play a 1-star reroll composition like Lissandra carry. There's not as many reroll builds right now after the B patch, but if you're looking to reroll, you won't be leveling. The major decision of Stage 2 is when you should level to 5. If If you're wanting to maintain high health or a win streak, level on 2-5. You can also pre-level at the end of 2-3 if you have the gold to do so, or if you're unable to hit 10 gold after the round is over. But for those of you who didn't level early, waiting to hit 5 until Krugs is usually the best decision. But you can spend the 8 gold to level on 2-5 if you've hit a power spike and can maintain a win streak until Krugs. Basically, your goal from 2-5 to Krugs is keep whatever streak you have to maximize your gold earned. Now we can transition into the mid-game, beginning with Stage 3. The pace of the game has gone up in Stage 3 because quite a lot of boards spike at level 6, which usually occurs around 3-2. Most notably is 6 Forgotten with Vayne carry. Besides having the 6 Forgotten, the two key aspects of Vayne carry are Shadow Jeweled Gauntlet and an attack speed item such as Rage Blade or Shadow Zeeks. The reason for this is that Vayne gets additional ability power because of Forgotten that adds to her ability's true damage, which can critically strike with Jeweled Gauntlet. If you're able to secure those items by level 6 and hit 6 Forgotten, you'll be in a prime position to go for a fast level 9. Katarina is another champion that can spike in Stage 6 with 3 Coven and 4 Assassin. For this to work, you need a blue buff on Katarina. Other items you can have at this point are Guardian Angel and Shadow Infinity Edge, but only prioritize those if you're wanting to force the Katarina composition. Otherwise, blue buff is enough along with the traits for hitting a strong Stage 3 power spike. There's plenty of other compositions that can spike at level 6, the question is whether or not you should roll. Generally, no, you want to wait and roll until level 7. But due to the pace of the game rapidly increasing as the meta continues to evolve, rolling on 6 to hit a power spike like 6 Forgotten can be worth it. Or if your board is really weak and you desperately need to stabilize, rolling may be necessary. But in general, try to avoid rolling on 6. The time to roll will be at level 7 on Stage 4-1 after Wolves. It's fine to level earlier than that if you have the economy to do so, just make sure you have at least 30 gold to roll with when leveling. Once you hit level 7 though, roll away. Some players may not need to roll on 7, or if they do roll, not very much, as having a high roll Stage 3 should be enough of a boost to let you skip 7 and slow level to 8. For everyone else though, you'll want to roll. What you're aiming for is a strong front line and main carry. With level 7 odds changed in set 5, the chances of hitting a 4 cost are quite good now, so it's likely you'll want to find a carry to play. As we've moved into Stage 4, let's talk about the mid-game compositions. There are a lot of viable compositions to play in the current meta. Just to name a few, there's Vel'Koz, Karma, Vayne Forgotten, Draven Forgotten, Mordekaiser Legionnaire, 6 Skirmishers, Aphelios, and Katarina carry. On top of those, there's also Lissandra reroll build with Coven. And on top of all of that, there's just placing the strongest board you can with a hodgepodge of champions and synergies. What you play depends entirely on what you hit when rolling, as well as what items you've made up till this point. Vel'Koz, for example, uses a lot of rod-based items like Jeweled Gauntlet and Hextech Gunblade. Karma is similar, except she also needs a blue buff. So if you prioritize those items early game, chances are you'll be leaning towards either of those champions. Bows are friends to auto-attack champions like Vayne, Jax, Aphelios, and Draven. Rage Blade is an all-around solid on most ranged carries, so building it early can be good for those champions later. Swords are also important for Aphelios, Jax, and Draven, as Bloodthirster adds much-needed sustain. Items aside, there's a lot of champions worth running if you can fit them onto your board. Diana and other assassins have amazing utility with either version of Frozen Heart. Rell is by far the best frontliner available, though she's particularly good for Vel'Koz because she's redeemed. Thresh is used for both frontlining and the utility of his pull. Lastly, the nerfs to Ivern and Volibear have lowered their value significantly, but they're both still useful in your frontline. There's a lot of options in the current meta, so find what works best for you. Whether that's forcing a certain type of build, like AP-focused compositions, or just playing off of what the game gets you. With that, we can finally move into the late game. Stage 5 is mostly important for level 8 timing, which will be anytime between 4-5 and 5-3. If you had to roll a lot on 7, the chances are you'll be leveling to 8 slower, so look more at 5-3. Players that were strong enough to avoid rolling are a lot more likely to level between 4-5 and 5-1. Level 8 is where you want to stabilize your composition by 2-starring as many champions as you can and adding in 5-cost champions you hit. Once again, some players may be stronger than the rest and can work towards leveling to 9 sometime after the dragon. For everyone else, level 8 is the end of the road. Ways that you can get stronger at level 8 include pivoting your board towards a 5-cost carry such as Heimerdinger, Teemo, or Kale. Another way to get stronger is simply adding in 5-cost champions to your board like Garen for frontline and magic damage comms, or Kindred in for Mystic and to protect your backline. Lastly, there's rolling for 3-star units, which depends a lot on your economy and the state of the game. As for level 9, well, it's mostly for players that were able to keep their health high or have been win streaking. It's difficult to comfortably hit level 9 in most games, so only do so if you're winning or barely losing health in Stage 4 and Stage 5. Aim to hit level 9 sometime after Dragon. The goal at level 9 is to simply play 5-cost champions relevant to your board. Overall, most of the end game is decided by the earlier stages. Doing well in the early game translates into a better mid game and a smoother late game. Having more health to work with means you can play greedier and you'll have more options late game. So make sure you work on improving your early game and how you transition into the mid game, as that will help you the most when going into late game. The major aspect of the late game to focus on is scouting and positioning. Scouting should be an ingrained habit, but positioning is much harder to learn. There's no real advice to give for general positioning because it depends heavily on what composition you have and the enemy compositions as well. But in general, it's best to keep moving your board around to prevent others from getting easy scouts on you, and of course, avoid major threats like Diana with a frozen heart, or keeping your carry on the same side as an enemy Vel'Koz. Watching streams with high ELO players is a great way to gain insight on how to improve positioning, but keep in mind, the best way to improve is to play the game often. And that's all for today's video, folks. The meta is continuing to evolve day after day, so try to focus less on specific compositions and instead improving your overall gameplay. Set 5 has been a lot of fun so far, with the game rewarding skill more than previous sets. Let us know in the comment section below what your goals are for Set 5 now that it's been out for almost 2 weeks. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying our content, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for future Giant Slayer TFT videos.